This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features Mika, Mackenzie, myself, and Maximus. Mika has brought out his Athreos deck, keeping an Orzhov Enforcer, Drana the Last Blood Chief, a Swamp, False Prophet, Labyrinth of Scophus, Burnished Heart, and a Tainted Field. Mackenzie is playing his Yarok energy deck, keeping Path of Ancestry, Gelatinous Cube, Thirsting Roots, a Forest, Evacuation, and Exotic Orchard. I am playing the classic Mistform, keeping 2 islands, Swiftfoot Boots, Imprisoned in the Moon, Patron Wizard, Sliver Hive, and Relic of Progenitus. Last but not least, Max is playing his Zur Eternal Schemer deck, and he's going to animate some enchantments. He keeps 2 Swamps, a Plains, Fractured Identity, Pact of Negation, Platinum Angel, and Evolving Wilds. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays Evolving Wilds. Mika just plays a Swamp. Mackenzie plays a tap Path of Ancestry. I draw and play an island. I pass, while Max fetches an island, sacrificing his Evolving Wilds. Max plays a Plains and passes. Mika's got a Tainted Field and taps 2 for an Orzhov Signet. Mackenzie draws, plays an Exotic Orchard, and passes. I play my second land and pay 2 for a Sword of the Anime. Max draws and plays a Swamp. He casts an Invasion of Athreos, making Mika defend it, and going to grab Heliod the Radiant Dawn. He passes after that. Mika plays a Caves of Koilos, and then pays 1 for land tax. He follows that up by casting Burnished Heart and passes turn. Mackenzie's got a Botanical Sanctum coming in, and then plays a Deadlock Trap. He passes to me after that. I play an island for turn, and tap 3 blue for a Patron Wizard, and pass. Maximus plays a Plains, and then casts the Heliod that he'd found, but with nothing to return from his graveyard, has to pass. Mika triggers land tax on his upkeep, grabbing some basics, and then draws. He plays a Plains for turn, and then casts an Orzhov Enforcer. Mackenzie has a tapped Temple of Deceit coming in, scrying 1 and bottoming it. He plays out Jace Mirror Mage, and upticks the Walker to scry 2 more. He passes after that. I draw and play a now outrageously expensive Foil Sliver Hive. I then cast Swiftfoot Boots and equip the Sword of the Animist onto the Patron Wizard. Moving to combat, I attack Mackenzie for 3 and get to find an island, putting it to play tapped. Max draws and plays a Swamp. He then casts Zur and goes to combat. He swings Heliod at me, who now has lifelink, and he deals 4 and gains 4. He passes after that. At the end of turn, Mika sacrifices his Burnished Heart to go and find 2 basics. Mika plays a Plains and has enough for Athreos. He then passes, putting a coin counter onto the Patron Wizard during his end step. Mackenzie plays a Forest for turn and taps enough for Yarok, getting to scry 1 from using the Path of Ancestry. He then activates Jace to scry 2 more, and passes. I draw, and equip the Swiftfoot Boots onto my Patron Wizard. Going to combat, I swing the Wizard at Max, as everyone else has some kind of death-touching creature, and Max just blocks with Zur. I still get to go and find an island from attacking though. And then in my second main phase, I cast Relic of Progenitus. Max draws and plays a Plains. He goes to combat and swings Zur at his Invasion of Athreos, dealing 1. After that, he plays the earlier version of Zur, Zur the Enchanter, and passes. Mika draws and plays a Labyrinth of Scophus. He then plays a False Prophet and goes to his end step and attempts to put a coin counter onto Zur the Enchanter. With the trigger on the stack, Max responds by casting Sejiri's Shelter to protect it, and with nothing else, Mika passes. Mackenzie draws and casts Live Fast, drawing 2, losing 2 and getting 2 energy. He then plays a Shipwreck Marsh and passes, and on his end step, I make Mika exile his Burnished Heart from his graveyard by tapping the relic. I draw and go to combat, swinging my Patron Wizard at Mackenzie. Mackenzie blocks it with Yarok to kill it, and it returns to play under Mika's control. After that, I pass to Max. Max draws and plays a Plains. He goes to combat, swinging both Zers at the evasion, and gets to find Alcide the Life's Bounty. The invasion then drops to 1, and in his post-combat main phase, Max is able to transform Heliod and passes. Mika draws and plays a Swamp. Going to combat, he swings the Patron Wizard and False Prophet at me, and the Orzhov Enforcer at Jake. We all then take the damage, and after combat, Mika plays Kaya's Wrath to destroy all creatures. In response, I cast a Mystic Confluence, choosing to bounce my Patron Wizard, the False Prophet, and drawing a card, and the Wrath then resolves. Mika gets to make a Spirit token from the Orzhov Enforcer, and then moves to cast Drana the Last Blood Chief. He moves to his end step, putting a coin counter onto her, and passing. Mackenzie draws and replays Yarok. He then upticks Jace again, and passes. I draw and play a Soul Ring. I then replay the Patron Wizard. I equip the boots and the sword to him, and then swing it at Max. I get to find an island from the sword, and Max then takes 3, and I pass. Max plays a Plains for turn, and then casts Fractured Identity and targets the land tax. It gets exiled, while all of Mika's opponents get a copy of it, and Max then passes. Mika draws and goes to combat. He swings Drana at Max, and gets to reanimate the Orzhov Enforcer with it, while I activate the relic to make him exile his Kaya's Wrath. After combat, he then plays Memorial to Folly and passes. Mackenzie triggers a land tax on his upkeep and finds 3 basics. He then draws and plays an island. After that, he casts Die Young to get 2 energy, but doesn't use any of it to kill Mika's Spirit token. He follows up by casting an Aetherworks Marvel and has enough energy to activate it, looking at the cards and getting a Tekthol into play. Mackenzie then wraps things up by upticking Jace, scrying 2, and passing. I get 3 islands off my land tax and draw. I play an island for turn, and then cast Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, upticking him to mill 2 and draw a card. I then go to combat and hit Max for 3 with the Patron Wizard and find an island as well. I follow up by casting Master of Waves, making 7 elemental tokens and passing. Max triggers his land tax and draws. He then plays an island and casts an Orzhov Signet and then recasts his commander. Mika recasts the False Prophet in his main phase, and going to combat, he swings Drana and the Spirit token at my Jace to take him out. He's got nothing to return though, and moves through his phases to his end step, and puts a coin counter onto Tekthol and passes. Mackenzie draws and plays a Swamp. He evokes Muldrifter, scrying from the Path of Ancestry, and then draws 4 thanks to Yarok. He then casts a Thirsting Roots to proliferate his energy, and Jace, and then upticks Jace again. He scries 2, and once he's done, passes to me. I draw and play a Phyrexian Metamorph as a copy of the Master of Waves, making 8 more tokens as it comes in. I then play an Imprisoned in the Moon on Mika's False Prophet, and go to combat. I swing the Patron Wizard at Max, and the Elementals at Mika. Max blocks with Zur, and Mika eats one of the Elementals with Athreos, but still takes the rest. I get to find an island as well, and after that, I pass. Max gets to find 3 basics from land tax, and draws, and plays an island. He casts Black Market Connections, and then goes to combat. He swings Zur at the Invasion of Theros to try and finish it off, and Mika activates the Labyrinth of Scophus in response. Max luckily has a Stifle for the Labyrinth trigger, and finishes the battle, which transforms into a Pharah. With nothing else, he passes. Mika draws and casts a Demonic Tutor, going to find a card, and then plays a Temple of False God. He goes to combat, swinging Drana at Max. In his post-combat main phase, he casts Dimensional Breach. I respond by casting Venser to bounce it to his hand. Mika then moves through his phases to his end step and puts a coin counter onto the original Master of Waves and passes. Mackenzie draws and upticks Jace to scry 2. He then plays a Decoction module and then a Thrumming Bird, making 2 energy. He then goes to combat and swings Tekkathol at me for 3. With that done, he passes through his phases and passes turn. I draw and play an island. I then kick a Rite of Replication and target my Master of Waves, but Max decides to pump the brakes, casting Pact of Negation. With my sweet play ruined, I then play a Sword of Light and Shadow and attach it onto the Patron Wizard. Going to combat, I swing the Wizard at Max and the Elementals at Mika. I get a basic from the Sword of the Animus trigger, and then gain 3 life from the Sword of Light and Shadow after Max takes the hit and Mika dies from my Elementals. Max triggers the land tax and then pays for his Pact of Negation trigger and draws. He then loses 6 life to make a treasure, draw a card, and make a changeling with the Black Market connections. He follows that up by casting the Golden Throne, and then sacrifices the changeling for 3 mana to help cast a Platinum Angel. After that, he passes to Mackenzie. Mackenzie draws and plays Temple of Malady, scrying 1. He then plays a Glint Sleeve Siphoner, making more energy, and follows up with Gelatinous Cube, exiling both of my Master of Waves and eliminating all of my tokens. Mackenzie then spins the Aetherwork Marvel again, putting Ralesks into the field, and has the ETB trigger put 2+1/+1 counters onto Tekkathol, and then uses Jace's 0 ability to get an Aether Tide Whale off the top. Going to combat, Mackenzie swings Tekkathol and the Thrumming Bird at me, and I take the hit. This allows Mackenzie to proliferate twice, adding a bunch of counters and some energy, and passing. I draw and crack the Relic of Progenitus to exile all graveyards and draw a card. I then go to combat, swinging the Patron Wizard at Max. I get to find an island, and then gain 3 life after it connects. In my second main phase, I then play a Castle Vantress and pass. Max draws and once more loses 6 life to Black Market connections for all 3 modes. He then cycles an Ash Barrens to find a Plains, playing it, and passing. Mackenzie draws and plays an Aether Swooper, getting 6 more energy, which allows him to activate the Aetherwork Marvels again. This in turn allows him to cast Tezzeret's Gambit off of it, drawing 2 and proliferating twice. He then activates the Decoction module, bouncing Ralsk back to hand before recasting it. Mackenzie then moves to combat, swinging his massive Tekkathol and Thrumming Bird at me, which I take. Mackenzie gets to proliferate twice again, adding more counters to everything, and passing after that. I scry with Castle Vantress on my upkeep and draw. I then play an island and cast Unctus, and then use its ability to make Patron Wizard into an artifact. Going to combat, I swing the Wizard at Max, getting an island and looting off of the Unctus trigger. Max is able to block it this time around with the Changeling token, and in my second main phase, I cast Mistform Ultimus and pass. Max triggers land tax and then draws and pays 6 life to the Black Market connections, getting all 3 modes. He then plays a Swamp for turn and casts Triskaidekaphobia and passes. Mackenzie draws and plays a Blighted Woodland. He then casts Confiscation Coup and then steals the Golden Throne from Max. Going to combat, Mackenzie swings the massive Tekkathol at me and the rest at Max. This has Max dropping to -4 after combat, and in his second main phase, Mackenzie then moves to cast a Reclamation Sage. With the Sage on the stack, Max responds by casting Demonic Consultation, naming Mana Drain, and he fortunately doesn't exile it from his top 6. He then exiles until he finds it, and he casts it, countering the Sage. Mackenzie then bounces Gelatinous Cube back to his hand with the Decoction module, and passes. On his end step, Max then uses Zur to transform his land tax and Black Market connection into creatures permanently. Everyone loses a life to the Triskaidekaphobia, and Max then draws and loses another 6 to the Black Market connections. He then plays a Swamp and casts Planar Rebirth, bringing back all the basics he discarded into play. Going to combat, Max then animates Triskaidekaphobia and swings everything he can at Mackenzie. Mackenzie blocks Triskaidekaphobia with Yarok and jumps afar with the Glint Seaver Siphoner, but still takes 9. Max gains enough life to take himself out of the negatives, and then passes to Mackenzie. Mackenzie draws and replays the gelatinous cube, exiling the Platinum Angel as it comes in. Max responds by casting an Eerie Interlude and blinks his Platinum Angel and Zur until the end of turn. Mackenzie then moves to combat. He swings enough fires at Max to take him out, but Max responds by casting a Stunning Reversal to avoid death once more. And as the spell keeps him at 1 life, he gets to draw a fresh 7. Mackenzie then upticks Jace again, and then plays an Aethertide Whale. This gives him enough energy to once more activate the Aetherwork Marvels. He gets to cast Plane-Wide Celebration, picking the motes to return Reclamation Sage and make 3 citizens off of it. He then passes, and Max's creatures come back to play during the end step, and before leaving the end step, Max casts Capsize with Buyback to bounce his Golden Throne to his hand. Everyone loses a life on Max's upkeep, and Max draws. He once more pays 6 life to the Black Market Connection to get all the modes. He then plays a Cloudsteel Kirin and reconfigures it onto Ifara. He then casts the Golden Throne again, and plays Teferi's Ageless Insight, followed by an Architect of Imagination. Going to combat, Mackenzie taps down the Platinum Angel with the Deadlock Trap, and Max swings all out at Mackenzie. Mackenzie takes it all, but is still alive, and Max passes. Mackenzie draws, and uses Jace's 0, getting a land. Going to combat, he swings everything he can at Maximus, dropping him to -33. And once that's done, casts an Evacuation. Max is ready though with a Dovin's Veto, and after that's countered, Mackenzie plays out a Noxious Gearhulk and targets the Platinum Angel. This has Maximus responding by activating the Golden Throne, and he sacrifices it to gain some mana. Mackenzie then casts a Reclamation Sage and targets the Golden Throne, and Max responds by bouncing it to his hand with Capsize with Buyback. With all hope on his Aetherwork Marvels, Mackenzie activates it after paying the appropriate energy, and he's luckily able to find a Carnivorous Canopy, which allows him to blow up the Kirin, making Max lose the game, and Mackenzie takes the win. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 43 minutes, and 33 seconds. Mistform seemed to unfortunately struggle with drawing other creatures. The Patron Wizard is fantastic, but I need to have a lot of other wizard backup to really use its ability better. The Master of Waves is a welcome addition to my board state, and then having a clone of it for the next turn was even better. I had to focus fire on Mika because I felt at the time that he was the most likely to have board wipes, since Athreos really wants to put coins on stuff and then wipe the boards so that he can reap all the benefits. And as you saw, that's exactly what Mika's deck did. He basically put coin counters onto stuff, reanimated stuff, stole stuff, and did typical Athreos things. I think he runs something like between 13 and 15 board wipes, so taking him out was probably the right move for me. I really liked the changes that Mackenzie made to his Yarok deck. He was gaining tons of energy and using them, plus Aetherworks Marvel is just a fun card to play in EDH, and it was great in Standard too. It also forced him to play a lot of weird cards that were focused around energy, which is always fun to see. I like limitations on deck building, and I think he did a really good job with this one. Speaking of threats, I actually wouldn't call Maximus's deck that threatening, although it was incredibly difficult to get rid of him it seemed like. Between the Golden Throne, the Platinum Angel, the Stunning Reversal, and the Cloudsteel Kirin, he seemed to have a multitude of ways to just not die. He was in the negatives of like -33 at points, and it didn't even faze him, which is kinda cool to see. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.